Just a few days after Donald Trump's second presidential win, much of America is still trying to make sense of the devastating results for Democrats while preparing for what comes next for the economy, race relations, immigration, and the courts. Meanwhile, Trump's already staffing some key positions in his next White House with loyalists. And he'll meet with President Biden in the Oval Office come Wednesday, as Democrats in Washington ponder how to fight back over these next few months and the next 4 years. And tonight, we'll wait on the final word in the 19 House races that remain uncalled to determine who controls that chamber, and for 2 uncalled swing state races on the Senate side, though Republicans are firmly in control after this week, which is where we begin tonight. Joining me now is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island. Senator, thank you for your time tonight and congratulations on winning re-election this week. The vice president, however, underperformed you by a handful of points in Rhode Island, which she won Tuesday night. But every county in the state shifted Republican compared to 2020. Looking at that and how Democrats fared nationally, what do you think happened this week?
I think we had less of a fighting stance than Donald Trump did. He looked like he was willing to take on anybody and anything, go as crazy as he wanted. And we were sort of the calm and orderly party. And I think when people are as upset as they are with 75% wrong direction numbers, you got to show that you're really ready to have a fight. In Rhode Island, everybody knows that about me because of my fight against dark money, my fight against the climate denial operation, my fight against the capture of the Supreme Court. So I kind of had that laid down, but I don't think we have that laid down nationally.
So staying with the issue of control of the Senate, Democrats are on track to win most of the swing state Senate races. Congresswoman Elisa Slotkin defeated former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers in Michigan. Senator Tammy Baldwin was reelected over Republican challenger Eric Hovde in Wisconsin, even as the state's 10 electoral votes went to Trump. And we are still waiting for the results out of 2 states where Trump has won: Arizona, where Democratic Senate candidate Ruben DeGaleo is leading his GOP opponent, and Pennsylvania, where Senator Bob Casey is trailing as of this afternoon. But even with the 2 big confirmed losses for Senate Democrats, John Tester in Montana and Sherrod Brown in Ohio, both of them performed better in their states than Vice President Harris. And I'll also mention North Carolina, where Trump prevailed while Democrat Attorney General Josh Stein won the governor's race. What do you make of these ticket-splitting results?
Again, I think there was a lot of local knowledge about home state senators, home state representatives who had built a brand already and who were known to their voters. I think at the national level, it's hard to make that same brand. And it's particularly hard to make a brand if you're not engaged in conflict, if you haven't defined a villain, if you're not in the kind of contest that creates moral clarity and news attention.
Now, I agree with you. I don't think anyone doubts I believe in fighting and fighting aggressively as you do. But do you think misogyny, the fact she was a woman, and race had anything to do with this?
I couldn't tell. I think the key thing for us now as Democrats is to get ready for an absolute tsunami of corruption coming out of this new administration. We know that Trump is corrupt. It's his nature. It's his character. We know the Republican Party is corrupt about climate change. They were bought by the fossil fuel industry a decade ago. We know that they've corrupted the United States Supreme Court. And we know that when you let the billionaires near power, they plunder the place with tax cuts for themselves and licenses to pollute. So we know what's coming. And I think right now the important thing is to look forward, be ready for that, point it out, and not let them get away with it.
Not let them get away with it. And billionaires, he had Elon Musk on the phone with he and Zelensky. That ought to tell you something. We learned today that President Biden will host Trump at the White House on Wednesday. What do you expect that conversation to entail?
Oh, I think it'll be high decorum, no substance. But I think President Biden wants to send a signal to the country that there actually is an orderly way to go about doing things. And, the violence of January 6th and the mad threats and the lies and all the stuff that Donald Trump has been spewing, he wants to create his Biden alternative. And after 4 good years as president, I think he's entitled to do that. If that's the signal he wants to send on the way out, God bless him.
Now, you're the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, and a number of economists have warned that Trump's fiscal proposals could spark an economic catastrophe. On that note, Trump has discussed his intention to put tech billionaire Elon Musk in charge of cutting $2 trillion from the federal budget in the name of efficiency. We remind our viewers that Trump's win appears to have already added roughly $15 billion to Musk's net worth. And what does it mean for the nation that Democrats have lost the Senate with Donald Trump returning to the White House?
Well, if Elon Musk wants to make those kind of cuts to federal spending, he needs to go back and read about a guy named David Stockman, who tried to do that as Reagan's budget director. And what he tried was so unpopular, even with Republicans, that it blew up in his face. And he was famously taken to the woodshed by Ronald Reagan, or at least pretended that he had been. So I think most of that is foolishness. I think that the budget problem that we're going to face is that climate change is starting to disrupt insurance markets in really significant ways. Florida is the epicenter of that problem. And if you can't get home insurance, you can't get a mortgage. And if you can't get a mortgage, it's hard to find a buyer for your house. And the end of the insurance to mortgage to property value cascade is what the chief economist for Freddie Mac, the mortgage company, not a green group, described as a coastal property values crash. And we're seeing its twin in wildfire country as well. So I think that's the looming economic danger. And of course, Trump pretends that this is all a hoax and pays no attention to the reality of it. So we're headed for the cliff.
And he called the COVID-19 a hoax until he couldn't. I'm out of time, but I must ask you about the Supreme Court, since you're on the Senate Judiciary Committee. In advance of Trump's return, a call has emerged among Democrats to push through as many judicial nominees as possible, and that includes the Supreme Court, where some have suggested that Justice Sotomayor should retire so Senate Democrats can rush through a younger replacement, which, of course, Republicans have vowed to fiercely resist. Have you heard support for this idea from your Senate colleagues?
I have not. I think at the end of the day, when you're on the Supreme Court, you make your own decision about when you're ready to retire. And however much noise pundits might make about Justice Sotomayor, this is her decision to make. And I trust her judgment as to her health, her longevity, her future, and what's best for the country.
Thank you for being with us, Rhode Island U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.